All right, let's talk about something that trips a lot of people up, the words Eskimo and Inuit. You've probably heard both, and maybe you've wondered what's the difference. And, is it okay to use them? It's a really common question, and honestly, an important one to get right. So today, we're going to break it all down. Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and tackle the big question right away. Is the word Eskimo offensive? The simple answer is, well, there is no simple answer. Like so many things tied up in history and culture, it's complicated. And what does that even mean, it's complicated? Well, it really depends on who you're talking to, and maybe even more importantly, where in the world you are. To really get why, we need to take a step back and understand who we're actually talking about. So let's zoom out and look at the peoples of the Arctic. And here's the thing you have to get right away. We are not talking about one single group of people, not even close. We're talking about a vast collection of distinct and diverse cultures spread all across the top of the globe. And wow, this map really puts that into perspective, doesn't it? Just look at the sheer scale we're dealing with. You've got peoples all the way from Siberia, stretching across Alaska, through the vast Canadian North, and right over to Greenland. This isn't one country or one culture. It's a massive, interconnected world of many distinct peoples. So that word Eskimo, where does it fit into all this? Historically, it was kind of this big, catch-all label used by outsiders. It was basically used to group together two main peoples: the Inuit, who you can see live across northern Alaska, Canada, and Greenland, and the Yupik peoples, who are in Alaska and even over in Siberia. The closely related Aleut peoples are also part of this big picture. And that brings us to a super important point, the Inuit-Yupik divide. We're talking about two distinct peoples with two different stories. And honestly, this distinction between them, it is the key to unlocking this whole puzzle. They are not the same, and once you get that, the whole name thing starts to make a lot more sense. For starters, just look at where they live. There's a pretty clear geographical split. The Inuit homelands stretch way up across the high Arctic coast. Think northernmost Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. The Yupik, on the other hand, are generally a bit further south and west, covering a lot of coastal Alaska and, like we said, even reaching into eastern Siberia. But it's not just about the map, The languages tell a fascinating story. If you look at the Eskimo-Aleut language family tree, you see it splits. And one of those big branches, the Eskimo branch, splits again. On one side, you have the Yupik languages, 4 of them, all distinct. And on the other, you have the Inuit languages. So this isn't just people deciding they're different. It's baked right into the very language they speak. It's a fundamental divide. And of course, behind all these names and maps, we're talking about real people. It's so important to remember that. Here we see an Inuit man from Greenland and an Iñupiat woman from Alaska. And the Iñupiat are one of the Inuit peoples. But this just helps put a face to the incredible human diversity that exists across these immense territories. So you might be wondering, how did they get so spread out? Well, it's an absolutely epic story of migration. It all starts back around the year 1000. The ancestors of today's Inuit, a people known as the Thule, started moving east from Alaska. And they just kept going. Over hundreds of years, they traveled all the way across the North American Arctic, eventually reaching Greenland. It was this incredible journey that created the Inuit world as we know it today. Okay, so let's get back to the big question. What's in a name? Now that we have a better sense of who's who in the Arctic, we can finally circle back to that word, Eskimo, and really dig into where it came from and why it's such a loaded term. First thing you need to know, the word Eskimo doesn't come from any Inuit or Yupik language at all. It was a name given to them by others. Now, the most likely theory from linguists is that it comes from a word meaning something like a person who laces a snowshoe. But there's another theory, a much more famous one, that says it means eaters of raw meat. And even though that origin is disputed by experts, that's the one that's stuck in many people's minds. And yeah, that negative association is a huge reason why it's considered a slur by so many. This brings us to the absolute core of the issue today. In Canada and Greenland, it's pretty straightforward. Eskimo is widely considered a derogatory term. It's been rejected. The proper term is Inuit. But, and this is the big but, in Alaska, it's a totally different story. The term Eskimo is still used, specifically because it's the only word that acts as a catch-all for both the Yupik and the Inuit peoples living there. And this quote right here just nails the Alaskan perspective. Think about it. If you call a Yupik person Inuit, you're actually getting it wrong. They aren't Inuit. It'd be like calling a German person French. So in Alaska, because the Yupik don't identify as Inuit, the term Eskimo has stuck around for a very practical reason. It's the only single word they have that includes every. So let's talk about identity and the terms we should use today. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to respecting how people name themselves. This is really the most important takeaway here, moving past the old labels and using the terms that people themselves use. So let's start with the word Inuit. It's a beautiful word that simply means the people. Simple as that. Now, it's important to note that Inuit is plural. If you're talking about just one person, you'd say Inuk. Getting that little detail right is a great way to show you're really paying attention. But you know what? We can get even more specific, because even Inuit can be a broad term. Whenever possible, it's always better to use the specific name for a group. People in Greenland are the Aleut. Inuit in northern Alaska are the Iñupiat. Over in the Canadian territory of Nunavut, they're the Nunavummiut. And in central Alaska, they are Yupik. Each name carries a unique identity. I love this picture because it's such a perfect, real-world example of this in action. This is a welcome sign in Iñupiat, Alaska. And look, it's in English, but it's also right there in the local Iñupiat language. That's not just a translation. That's a powerful statement about identity, pride, and using the names that belong to the land and its people. So, after all that, what's the bottom line? It's actually pretty simple. The best, most respectful approach is always to use the specific name a person or group uses for themselves. That's it. And hey, if you're ever not sure what that name is, the best thing you can do is just ask. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If the complex history of these names teaches us anything, what is it? I think it shows us that the words we use for each other, they really, truly matter. They aren't just labels we're throwing around. They are packed with history, with identity, and with respect.